The storm rattled the outpost walls like a drumbeat of doom. Outside, Proxima 9's twin tempests sand and static howled across the wastes, scouring everything in their path. Inside, the metallic corridors trembled with each gust, dust sifting from ceiling vents, despite the polished finish. Lieutenant Commander Garrick Reeves lay on the cold slab that served as a medical cot, his breath shallow, every exhale flecked with copper. The hole in his chest burned, as though fire had taken root beneath his ribs, the makeshift mesh pressing down on the wound, doing little more than slowing his descent toward oblivion. He kept his eyes open only by force of will. Military discipline had carried him through firefights, orbital drops, and years of endless campaigns. But here in this sterile chamber, with alarms droning faintly through the walls, he could feel that discipline thinning like thread worn too taut. He muttered a curse, voice breaking with weakness, and tried to shift his weight. The effort sent a fresh surge of agony across his chest. Black stars flaring in his vision. Dr. Adara Nix stood at his side, gloved hands steady, though her eyes betrayed the truth. The purple sheen of her skin caught the emergency lights. Her features set with the kind of concern a battlefield physician never allowed themselves to show. White hair, pulled back into a loose knot, had escaped its bindings, strands clinging to her cheeks with the dampness of the lab's recycled air. Her gaze flicked between him and the vital display numbers sliding the wrong direction. "Your heart is failing," she said, her tone too calm, too deliberate. "You don't have minutes left, Garrett. You have seconds." He barked a laugh that dissolved into a cough. "Patch me enough to finish the fight," he rasped. "I don't need pretty numbers on your screen. I need to get back out there." Her eyes tightened. "Your squad is gone. If you step outside that door again, you'll join them before the storm swallows you whole." She hesitated, glancing at the wall panel sealed by biometric lock. For the first time since dragging him in from the battlefield, she looked unsure. Then she moved, pressing her palm to the scanner. A soft hiss answered as the unit released, revealing a single injector cradled in chilled vapor. Inside the vial, liquid the color of deep ocean light glowed faintly, condensation trailing down its casing. Strange glyphs shimmered across its surface, alive with their own pulse. Garrett's throat worked as he swallowed. "That's no field med kit." "What the hell is it?" Her hands, usually decisive, lingered as she lifted the device. "Project Chimera," she said softly, as though speaking the words aloud might invite judgment. "It was never meant for this world, not yet. It can heal you. More than heal you, it can rebuild what was destroyed. But if I use it, you won't be human anymore." He tried to laugh again, but the sound came out hollow. "That's your sales pitch? I need you to understand." She leaned close, urgency pushing through her professional composure. "It will save your life, but it will strip away everything humanity has evolved past. Primal coding, instincts you don't remember your species ever had. They'll wake again. You'll be stronger, faster, but less you." Her violet eyes met his, and for a heartbeat, the storm outside seemed to fall silent. "This isn't a wound I can stitch. This is a choice I cannot make for you." His vision wavered, darkness creeping at the edges. He thought of his squad, their laughter at mess, the silence after the ambush. He thought of the enemy hunting through the storm, searching for survivors to finish the job. He thought of dying on a slab in a cold outpost, forgotten, while the mission lay unfinished. He clenched his jaw, tasting iron. Humanity was more than skin and bone, more than the fragile flesh now failing him. It was memory, loyalty, refusal to surrender when every rational argument said to lie down and quit. If the serum could give him one more chance to strike back, then humanity already demanded he'd take it. His lips cracked into the ghost of a grin. "You said it makes me stronger." Adara's hand trembled almost imperceptibly as she nodded. It makes you more. But once it's done, there is no return. The monitor shrieked, his heartbeat stumbling toward silence. He forced his gaze to lock with hers, the scientist and the soldier suspended on the knife's edge of life and death. Do it. For a heartbeat, she looked as though she might refuse. Then her elegant finger pressed the trigger. The injector hissed against his neck, and liquid fire poured into his veins. His body arched from the cot, a strangled cry tearing from his throat. White light consumed his vision. His heart stuttered once, twice, and then the darkness claimed him whole. Garrett's world fractured into a storm of sensation. Heat and ice battled beneath his skin as the serum tore through him, rewriting the blueprint of his very existence. His chest convulsed, his hands clenched until nails bit into his palms. He tried to breathe, but the air itself felt too sharp, cutting down his throat in razored gulps. Then, like a fuse catching, the fire inside him erupted. Every nerve screamed. Every bone hummed. His body became a battlefield of tearing and rebuilding, death and rebirth colliding in the space of heartbeats. Garrett thought he had known pain before bullet wounds, broken ribs, shrapnel burns, but this was something beyond pain. This was annihilation disguised as salvation. And then the storm inside him snapped into silence. His eyes flew open. The world had changed. The dim lights of the outpost no longer flickered in shadows. They burned bright, showing dust motes suspended like tiny stars. He could hear the faint hum of the power lines in the walls, each oscillation distinct. The air reeked of ozone, antiseptic, and beneath it all, the quickened rhythm of Adara Nix's heartbeat. It thundered in his ears louder than any artillery barrage. Garrett sat up without realizing he had moved. His chest, once a ruin of torn flesh, was whole. Smooth skin stretched where a hole had been moments ago. He pressed his palm to it, half expecting blood to rise again. Nothing. Only warmth. Only life. Adara had stepped back, her eyes wide, the vial's casing still misting in her trembling hands. She looked like a woman caught between triumph and terror. "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Garrett flexed his hands. Muscles coiled beneath his skin like steel cables. He inhaled and nearly staggered from the flood of scents, the metallic tang of the table, the faint sweetness of Adara's perfume, the bitterness of fear on her tongue. He turned his gaze toward her, and she flinched, though she did not move. "Stronger," he said, though the word came out deeper, rougher than before. He tested his jaw, tasted his own voice, and found it strange. "Sharper. I can hear them." Adara's brow furrowed. "Hear who?" Garrett tilted his head, focusing past the walls, past the storm. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. Metal boots grinding sand into stone. The low whine of charging plasma cells. 6 soldiers, moving in formation, hunting through the storm toward the outpost. He could picture them without seeing, their weapons raised, their breaths muffled by helmets. "The Draxians," he whispered. "They're here." Adara's hands clenched around the empty injector. "You shouldn't be able to detect them like that." Not so soon. He rose to his feet in a single fluid motion. The floor seemed lighter beneath him, the air thinner, as though the outpost no longer bound him. A predatory smile curved his lips before he even realized it. "They killed my squad." His pupils narrowed to slits, glowing faintly in the sterile light. "Now I hunt them." Adara stepped forward quickly, placing a hand on his arm. The contact jolted him. Her skin burned against his, not painfully, but with an intensity that felt alive. She didn't recoil, even though she must have felt the tremor in his muscles. "Garrett, you don't understand what you're becoming. The serum amplifies everything, your instincts, your drives. If you give in to them, you'll lose control." He looked down at her, meeting her violet gaze. For a fleeting moment, Something human flickered behind the hunger in his eyes. "Control is for men who have time to waste," he said, though the words sounded foreign even to him. He inhaled again, tasting her heartbeat, her fear, her defiance, and then the outpost shuddered as an explosion struck the perimeter wall. Warning sirens blared, red light washing across their faces. Dust rained from the ceiling. Garrett straightened, the storm inside him surging with lethal purpose. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice carrying a dangerous calm. His lips peeled back in a smile that no longer belonged entirely to a man. "And watch what your creation can do." The outpost groaned as another impact rocked its foundations. Crimson alarms pulsed against the steel walls, shadows flashing across Garrett's face. He moved with a speed that startled even him, crossing the chamber in a blur. The reinforced hatch shuddered under an enemy breaching charge, its edges glowing hot. He could hear the alien soldiers outside, 6 of them, weapons primed, claws clicking on stone as they adjusted formation. They didn't whisper, but he could still sense their intent. Adara pressed herself against a console, clutching a datapad and the empty injector like they were charms to ward off evil. "Garrett, wait," she began, but her voice was drowned out by the hiss of melting metal. The door blew inward. The first Draxian stepped through, towering and armored, eyes like shards of obsidian. It barely had time to register the figure waiting within. Garrett launched forward, low and fast, his body obeying instincts his mind barely grasped. One moment he was a man, the next a streak of movement. His hand snapped the alien's neck with a crack that reverberated through the corridor. The soldier dropped before its weapon ever cleared its harness. Adara gasped, horror mixing with awe. Garrett didn't pause. He was already moving. 2 more surged in, rifles spitting plasma bolts. Garrett saw them before they fired, saw the micro-twitch of muscles in their arms, smelled the ozone spike as their weapons charged. He twisted aside, impossibly fast, feeling the heat of the shots scorch past his cheek. He slammed one soldier's rifle upward, the bolt carving a smoking gash into the ceiling, then drove his elbow into the alien's throat. The creature collapsed, convulsing. The other he caught by the wrist, yanked forward, and slammed into the wall so hard the bulkhead dented .3 down. The remaining soldiers hesitated. Garrett could smell at fear, sharp and acrid. Their formation faltered, but discipline forced them onward. One barked an order in their guttural tongue, and they charged as a unit. Garrett's vision shifted. The world slowed, details stretching into clarity. He could hear every intake of breath, every click of claws against steel. He felt the storm outside press against the walls, urging him forward. He didn't fight them like a soldier. He fought them like something else. He leapt upward, his fingers digging into the ceiling as if steel were no more than clay. Plasma fire lanced through the space where he'd been, and then he dropped, landing behind them in utter silence. His hands became weapons' precision strikes at joints, throats, nerves. He moved without thought, guided by a knowledge he didn't remember learning, exploiting vulnerabilities in alien anatomy as if he'd studied it his entire life. When the last one fell, the room was still again. 6 bodies sprawled across the floor, weapons smoking, armor dented and broken. Garrett stood among them, chest rising steady, unmarked. Not even a bead of sweat touched his brow. Adara hadn't moved. She stood pressed against the console, her datapad clutched like a shield. Her violet eyes were wide, reflecting the glow of the emergency lights. She whispered, "Sweet stars." Garrett turned, amber light flickering faintly in his pupils. For a moment, the predator lingered on his expression, the tilt of his head, the 2 still poise of his body. Then he smiled, and it was a smile that belonged to no soldier she had ever treated. "They'll send more," he said, voice low and certain. He wiped his blood-stained hand across his chest, where only smooth skin remained. I can feel them in the storm. Adara's fingers tightened on her datapad. Garrett, this isn't human. You tore through them like they were nothing. He approached her, each step deliberate, each movement carrying a quiet menace he didn't intend, but couldn't quite suppress. When he stopped before her, she could feel the heat radiating off his body. His gaze bore into her, sharper than any scalpel. Maybe not human, he admitted. His tone softened just enough to make her breath catch. But alive. And that's more than I was 5 minutes ago. Another explosion rolled across the outpost, shaking dust from the ceiling. Distant war cries echoed through the storm outside. Garrett tilted his head toward the sound, lips curling into something between a grin and a snarl. They think they're hunting. His voice dropped to a dangerous purr. But they're wrong. I'm hunting them. Adara's pulse spiked, and he heard it as clearly as the storm. He leaned close, his breath brushing her ear. Stay behind me, Doctor. Whatever I've become, it's exactly what they should fear. The storm swallowed them whole as the auxiliary corridor gave way to the outside world. Sand lashed against the outpost's hull, each grain stinging like a needle. Static lightning flashed across the violet sky, painting jagged scars of light over the endless dunes. Garrett moved through it with effortless grace, his body navigating the chaos as though the storm bent to his will. Adara stumbled behind him, her arm tucked tight against her chest. Datapad clutched like it might shatter if she let it go. His hand darted back more than once to steady her, and each touch sent a shiver through them both, though for very different reasons. By the time they reached the camouflage transport buried beneath a ridge of stone, Adara's breath was ragged, her white hair plastered against her cheeks. Garrett, by contrast, looked untouchable, his stride unbroken, his chest rising and falling with a calm rhythm no storm could disrupt. When the hatch closed and the hum of the vessel's engines filled the silence, she leaned against the wall, trembling with exhaustion. Garrett stood by the viewport, eyes fixed on the writhing storm outside. He didn't just look at it. He saw patterns within the chaos waves of sand folding over one another, pulses of magnetic static weaving like threads through the sky. He felt it in his blood, as if the serum had attuned him to the heartbeat of the planet itself. And then something stranger still, a pulse of awareness not his own. Eyes in the darkness, minds brushing against his, cautious but curious. The vessel cut across the storm until it slid into a hidden hangar mouth carved into the side of a jagged mountain. The doors sealed behind them with a deep metallic thud, shutting out the chaos of the desert. Light filled the chamber, revealing a laboratory hollowed from stone, reinforced with steel, lined with equipment far beyond what the outpost possessed. It smelled of sterilized air, ozone, and faint traces of alien flora sealed in glass canisters. Adara moved quickly, her scientist's instincts returning as she activated the lab systems. Panels flared to life, consoles hummed, specimen cases rotated on magnetic lifts. Garrett wandered instead, silent, his gaze drawn to a reinforced window overlooking the valley below. Beyond the glass, alien wildlife stirred, six-legged herbivores grazing, small reptilian hunters skittering between rocks. As his eyes locked on them, something happened. The largest beast, plated in natural armor, raised its head and met his gaze through the glass. A ripple of recognition passed between them. Not words, not thoughts, but an echo. Apex recognizing apex. Garrett's hand pressed to the glass. He felt the creature's awareness brush against his own. Behind it, others stirred, predators emerging from the scrub, their heads turning toward the facility in unison. Adara's voice broke the trance. Fascinating. She stood beside him, eyes wide. The serum has activated dormant pathways. Humans have the architecture for psionic resonance, but it's been dormant for millennia. You're not controlling them. You're communing. Garrett's lips curved into a grim smile. They know I'm one of them now, and they'll listen. He turned from the window, the golden light in his eyes unsettling and mesmerizing at once. That's how we survive the next wave. Adara frowned, her datapad glowing in her hands. Survival isn't enough. The serum hasn't stabilized. It's still rewriting you. If I can create a baseline compound, I can anchor the transformation, keep you from losing yourself completely. He stepped toward her, the predatory poise in his body at odds with the gentleness of his words. And if you can't? She swallowed, her lavender flush betraying the answer she didn't want to speak. Then you become something unrecognizable. He reached out, catching her wrist as she tried to adjust the scanner on his arm. The touch ignited a spark neither of them expected. In an instant, their minds brushed the faint, intimate telepathy of her people, bridging through skin-to-skin contact. Garrett gasped, his thoughts momentarily not his own, but mingled with hers. He felt her fear, her determination, and beneath it, a longing she'd buried under years of clinical detachment. Adara staggered back, eyes wide, breath quick. "You didn't tell me about that," he murmured. His voice was rough, edged with something primal, but his hand was gentle when he let her go. "Because humans can't handle it," she replied, her composure cracking. "The psychic resonance overwhelms them. But you—" Her gaze traced his face, the glow beneath his skin, the strange calm that radiated from him. "You're not entirely human anymore." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Garrett stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, yet his expression softer than any he'd worn since she had met him. "Then maybe that's what saves us. You anchor me, Adara. Even if the serum makes me a predator, you remind me I'm still a man." Her breath caught at the sound of her name on his lips. She didn't step away this time. The perimeter alarm shrieked suddenly, cutting through the tension. Garrett's head snapped toward the sound, eyes narrowing. He inhaled, his awareness stretching outward, linking with the predators beyond the mountain. "They're here," he said, voice low and certain. "A strike team, heavily armed." Adara clutched the datapad tighter. "I need an hour to synthesize the stabilizer. If they breach before then—" Garrett's smile was sharp, his amber eyes burning in the sterile light. "Then I hold the line." The mountain lab trembled as the first distant impacts rolled through the stone. Dust drifted from the ceiling vents. The sirens wailed, painting the sleek walls in pulses of crimson. Garrett stood still in the middle of the lab, head tilted as if listening to a song only he could hear. His amber pupils narrowed, then widened again. "They've landed," he said. His voice carried no uncertainty. 3 dropships, 30 soldiers, heavy ordnance. Adara's fingers moved quickly over the console, the glow of chemical sequences flickering across her lavender skin. "I need more time. The stabilizer compound isn't ready." Her voice caught, then steadied with effort. "If they take you alive, if they get your blood, they won't." Garrett's lips curved into a dangerous smile. Outside, the storm howled, wind carving across the cliffs. Beneath it, Garrett's awareness stretched outward. He felt the valley's life like 100 glowing embers in the dark 6-legged feline hunters crouched low in the rocks. Massive horned grazers turning their plated heads toward the threat, even venom-spined flyers stirring from their roosts. Their instincts met his, and he leaned into the connection. Images rushed back, shadows moving in unison, the smell of blood, the certainty of ambush. Apex recognizing apex. "Garrett." Adara's voice broke through the trance, taut with both fear and urgency. "Every kill pushes you further from yourself. If you lose control—" He turned his gaze on her, eyes glowing faintly, and for an instant she felt the storm's predator staring through the man. Then his features softened. Give me something human to come back to, he said. The words landed heavier than the tremors rattling the walls. She swallowed hard, then reached out and caught his hand. The contact lit the telepathic bond like a live wire. He gasped as her mind brushed his flashes of determination, terror, longing, and she felt his in turn. The war of instinct against memory, the ache of comrades lost, the stubborn refusal to die a weapon. For a heartbeat, the predator stilled. The alarm spiked again. Garrett tore his hand free, his face hardening. They're at the ridge. Adara forced her attention back to the console, chemicals swirling under her manipulations. 1 hour. That's all I can promise. Garrett strode to the weapons rack. He barely glanced at the neural disruptor before setting it aside. His claws had begun to push through his fingertips again, gleaming like obsidian blades. I have better options. Outside, the predator shifted at his call. The feline hunters slunk into position among the boulders, tails twitching with anticipation. The horned grazers lowered their massive heads, armored plates ready to crush. Above, the venomous flyers circled in eerie silence, their wings catching the static flashes of the storm. Garrett saw it all through their eyes 30 armored. Draxians marching into terrain they didn't understand. He bared his teeth. Let's buy you that hour. Doctor. The mountain shook as the first plasma round struck the exterior shields. Garrett slipped into the storm, vanishing into the crimson haze. The predators moved with him, silent and deadly. The valley itself rising to answer his will dot in the lab. Adara's hands trembled over her instruments, not from fear of the enemy outside, but from the realization that the serum hadn't just created a weapon. It had created a commander, and the question she couldn't escape was simple, terrifying, and inevitable. When the battle was done, would Garrett Reeves still be hers to bring back, or would the predator keep him for itself? Asterisk, the mountain shook one final time, a shockwave rippling through the bedrock as Garrett slammed the reinforced hatch shut behind him. Outside, the valley was littered with wreckage alien bodies torn apart by claw and fang, dropships burning against the storm. The predators had obeyed his will and then melted back into the wild, their minds brushing his with satisfaction before fading into silence. Garrett staggered as the connection ebbed, his chest heaving, claws retracting back into trembling fingers. Adara was waiting, pale even against her lavender skin. The stabilizer vial glowed faintly in her hands. You held them, she whispered, equal parts awe and fear. He gave a ragged smile. Bought us your hour. Moments later, the research vessel thundered out of the hidden hangar, cloaked in its stealth field. The storm peeled away behind them, revealing the black expanse of Proxima 9's orbit. Hanging there like a predator, waiting to strike, was the Draxian, flagship High Gemini's fist a fortress of angular metal and pulsing energy veins. Around it drifted 2 cruisers, their sensor nets sweeping the void. Garrett's jaw tightened at the sight. That's where they'll take the sample. Adara's hands danced across the console. The stabilizer has a secondary function, now modified into a viral agent. If we can introduce it to your stolen blood, it'll corrupt every clone, every experiment they attempt. But it'll affect me too, he finished, watching her out of the corner of his eye. She nodded, reluctant. I can immunize you, but it will suppress the serum's enhancements for several hours. You will be human again, vulnerable. Garrett studied his claw-scarred hands, flexing them once. For the first time since the injection, he felt the gnawing hunger in his chest ease. He thought of his squad, their bodies left to the storm. He thought of Adara, her trembling hand reaching for him when no one else would. Then it's a fair trade. He offered his arm. The injector hissed, the serum's glow dimming beneath his skin. The wild storm in his head quieted. The predators of the valley fell silent. He felt suddenly smaller, weaker, and oddly at peace. The vessel slipped into the flagship's shadow, bypassing the cruiser nets using stolen codes Adara had lifted from a captured scientist's data pad. They docked in a silent auxiliary bay, lit only by the eerie glow of containment vats lining the walls. Garrett moved first, but his body lacked its former sharpness, no longer a blur, just a soldier relying on years of training. They kept to maintenance tunnels, shadows swallowing them as patrols passed. The deeper they moved into the flagship, the more Garrett felt the vulnerability pressing in. Each scrape of armor, each hiss of hydraulics sent his instincts flaring, but muted now, dampened by the immunization. He breathed through the unease, following Adara's steady lead dot at last. They emerged into a gallery overlooking the research sector. Garrett froze. Below them, in vats of turquoise fluid, 3 humanoid forms convulsed against their restraints. The glow beneath their gray skin pulsed brighter with each spasm. His blood, twisted with Traxian genes, had already birthed them. Adara's voice was low, grim. "They're unstable. Look." One prototype's chest split open in a burst of light, collapsing into a pool of dissolving tissue. "The serum rejects their physiology." Garrett's fists clenched. "They'll keep trying until they get it right." The sample chamber was heavily guarded, 2 soldiers at the reinforced door. Garrett's senses, dulled but not gone, told him their movements, their breath. He shook his head. "Not like this. Not without the serum." Adara pulled a small device from her satchel, lips tight. "Then let me." She activated it, and power surged through the walls, plunging the corridor into flickering darkness. The guards moved to investigate, leaving their post. Garrett and Adara slipped inside. Rows of containment units stretched before them, alien specimens sealed in glass. At the center sat a single vial of crimson, laced with turquoise light, his blood. Adara moved quickly, her hands steady despite the chaos. She injected the viral agent directly into the vial, the crimson glow flaring briefly, then subsiding. "Done," she whispered. Relief softened her shoulders. "If they use it, they die." The door hissed open. A tall figure stepped inside, armor black and jagged, his scaled face lit by cruel intelligence. High Commander Trell. At his side stood 2 guards, and behind them, a Nixian scientist whose deep blue skin mirrored Adara's own. His voice trembled. "Adara? By the stars, it is you." Adara's face hardened. "Valen." Her words dripped contempt. "I see you've chosen servitude." Trell's gaze fixed on Garrett, lingering on the faint glow still threaded beneath his veins. "So this is the human weapon," he said, voice like grinding stone. "You've caused us much inconvenience." Garrett shifted into stance. No claws this time, only a soldier's poise. "Your prototypes are failures," he said flatly. "A temporary setback," Trell replied, lips curling into a smile. "With Dr. Nix to guide us, the serum will be perfected. Take them both. Kill the human if you must, but the scientist lives." Garrett's pulse steadied, his instincts clawing at the edges of his dulled humanity. He caught Adara's gaze. For a moment, neither spoke, but the bond was there, fragile and real. She gave the faintest nod. Garrett bared his teeth. "You'll have to try harder than that." And with the darkness of the lab collapsing into chaos, a predator inside him surged against its leash, ready to break free. The lab dissolved into violence. Trell's command cut short as Garrett hurled a specimen canister at the lights, plunging the chamber into a pulsing red gloom. The guards lunged forward, energy rifles crackling, but Garrett was already moving. Even weakened, training carried him ducking under a plasma burst, slamming a guard's weapon hand against the wall until bones cracked. The second guard aimed for Adara. Garrett's body reacted before thought, throwing himself between them, the bolt tearing into his shoulder. Pain flared, hot and raw. Something inside him broke loose. The immunization faltered under the shock, the serum's hunger surging back. His blood burned turquoise. His vision sharpened until he could see every pore in Trell's scaled face, every bead of sweat rolling down Valen's temple. His claws tore through his skin again, gleaming black. The predator roared back to life. Adara cried out, torn between terror and relief. He was alive, but he was slipping. Trell drew his blade, its plasma edge hissing with blue fire. He advanced without hesitation, his bulk moving with terrifying speed. "You think yourself a predator, human?" He hissed, swinging with a force that split a containment vat behind Garrett, sending chemicals flooding across the floor. "My kind hunted prey across 3 systems before yours even walked upright." Garrett took the blow on his forearm. Flesh sizzled, but bone held and healed. He bared his teeth, driving a fist into Trell's chest, denting the commander's armor. "Maybe so," he growled, his voice not entirely human. "But humanity was never the apex. We were prey. We learned to survive anyway. That's what makes us dangerous." They collided again, a blur of blade and claw, strike and counterstrike. Trell fought with centuries of honed instinct, his armor amplifying every blow. Garrett fought with something else: adaptability, a soldier's mind wrapped in a predator's body. He shifted tactics mid-breath, feinting low, striking high, exploiting gaps Trell didn't even know he had. With a final, bone-shattering strike, Garrett smashed the commander's breastplate inward. Trell collapsed to his knees, defiance burning in his multifaceted eyes, then went still. Alarms wailed overhead. Adara's gaze darted to the containment systems. The viral agent she had injected into Garrett's stolen blood had spread, leaching through conduits into every prototype, every test chamber. Monitors flared red as tissue collapsed into molten ruin. Chain reactions cascaded across the sector, containment fields overloading. "The ship's going critical," Adara shouted. She clutched the remaining data drives to her chest. "We have to move." Garrett grabbed her hand, claws retracting as he fought for control. "Then let's finish this together." They ran, weaving through collapsing corridors, sparks raining from ruptured conduits. Garrett tore doors open with raw strength, shielding Adara from falling debris, his body healing wounds as fast as they came. Behind them, the research sector tore itself apart, explosions shuddering through the flagship like a beast, devouring itself from within. They reached their vessel just as fire consumed the docking bay. Adara launched them into the void, engines screaming. Through the viewport, Garrett watched the flagship convulse, great fractures ripping across its armored hull. Then it burst, a dying sun scattering wreckage into the dark. The cruisers floundered, their command structure shattered. The Predator in Garrett thrilled at the destruction, but the man in him turned away, focusing instead on the woman beside him. 3 months later, the tribunal chamber glowed with sterile light. Garrett stood straight in his dress uniform, Adara at his side, datapads stacked before the Allied Council. General Thorne's voice was clipped, suspicious. "Commander Reeves, are you stable?" Garrett nodded once. "Dr. Nix developed a permanent stabilizer. I retain enhancements healing. Senses, but the predatory compulsion is controlled." He didn't add that it was as much her presence, her hand anchoring him beneath the table, as it was any serum. Adara's voice was steady, brilliant. The Chimera serum must never be weaponized. But as controlled medicine, it offers regeneration, immunity, neural restoration. We propose an ethical research initiative under oversight. The panel debated, voices sharp and wary. In the end, approval came with conditions: strict supervision, limited application. A fragile trust born in fire. Later, walking beneath the Arboretum's dome of artificial starlight, Garrett finally exhaled. Adara's fingers slipped between his, her skin cool against his heat. "They're calling you a hero back on Earth." she said with a small smile. He shook his head. We stopped them. Together. Her eyes softened, her lavender flush rising. You feared losing your humanity. But maybe becoming less human was what let you find it again. Garrett looked at her, the glow still faint beneath his skin, the predator forever a part of him now. He thought of the serum, the storms, the bond that had carried him through. You said I'd stop being human if I took it, he murmured, leaning close. Maybe you were right. Maybe I became something more. She answered him with a kiss, one that sealed not just survival, but the promise of a future forged between predator and scientist, man and woman, human and Nixian. Above them, the artificial stars burned bright, reflecting in his amber eyes. The predator was still there, but so was the man. And together, they were stronger than either could ever be alone.